I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today, deeply honored to introduce Helen Krieble to announce this year's winner of the Vernon K. Krieble Foundation's Unsung Hero Award. I've been a constitutional litigator at the Institute for Justice for coming up on 15 years now, and I can honestly say that my colleagues and I have the best job a lawyer can have. We sue bureaucrats. Speaking of fulfilling vocations, as many of you know, one of IJ's 4 pillars is economic liberty, or the right to earn an honest living in the occupation of your choice. America is the most prosperous nation the world has ever known, and that's because for most of our history, we have honored and encouraged free enterprise, fostering entrepreneurs instead of fleecing them. Unfortunately, that has changed, as most of the people in this room are very well aware, and many of the organizations in this room try to fight against. In the 1950s, just 5% of the American workforce was subject to occupational licensing. Today, that number is near 30% and rising. That puts tremendous power in the hands of petty bureaucrats to decide if, how, and when people can enjoy the dignity and fulfillment of honest work. And wow, is that power abused. To counter those abuses, IJ fights for would-be entrepreneurs in courts of law and courts of public opinion. We've represented African hair braiders in half a dozen states, from Arkansas to Utah to California. We've represented florists and casket-selling monks in Louisiana and taxi drivers right here in Colorado, and the list goes on. Nowhere in my experience are the Goliaths more numerous, more relentless, and more effective when it comes to using the power of government to legislate than when it comes to using the power of government to legislate would-be competitors out of business. It takes a very special David to go out onto the field and contend with those Goliaths, and it takes an even more special David to beat them. In a moment, you'll hear from somebody who did just that. But now it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce the benefactor of the Unsung Hero Award, the founder and president of the Vernon K. Krieble Foundation, Ms. Helen Krieble.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad to see all of you, and you're all working hard in the trenches for freedom, and I'm proud to be associated with all of you. I'm honored and excited to present the VKK Foundation's 2014 Unsung Hero Award. As citizens, we the people. We are responsible for protecting our freedom from government overreach and tyranny. We're charged with preserving our unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not too many people step up to that plate in our local communities. This award honors those individuals who, on their own initiative, using their own time, energy, and money, have fought for freedom in their communities and beyond. These are heroes, often completely unacknowledged, defenders of liberty. What they do as an example is for all of us, proof that we, as responsible individuals, can make a difference, putting the lie to the excuse, I am only one person, what can I do? I would like to thank SPN, particularly Tracy Sharp and Jennifer Butler, who did a lot of work for this award, and all the state organizations who've nominated such amazing and brave freedom fighters. We wish we could honor them all, but let me mention a few. Melanie Armstrong is the individual name behind a hair braider who opposed the governor's executive order to require 3,200 hours of training to be licensed to teach braiding in Mississippi, and won. Laura Baston, you've heard about before, who successfully fought forced unionization for daycare providers in Illinois. Pam Harris, who thwarted unionization of home care providers and received state aid in Illinois. I mean, she received it, taking care of her disabled child, and was told that she had to join a union and be licensed. And she became an example not only in her own community, but across the nation. Bill Haupt, who led a charge against annexation of private property without the owner's consent in Tennessee. Deborah Lamb, who led the successful opposition to Common Core in Montana. And Julie Crow, who fought against restrictions prohibiting competition from new businesses like her vehicle for hire company, and won. These are amazing people. And the idea that each and every one of us can stand up and do something important in our communities is a critical part of our fight for freedom. I encourage each state organization to establish their own statewide Unsung Hero Awards. Individual citizens across our nation can and do stand up for freedom. I would like now to introduce to you this year's winner of the VKK Foundation Unsung Hero Award, Patti Morrow. Patti Morrow is an interior designer. When the American Society of Interior Designers attempted to take over the interior design industry through a licensing program requiring a 4-year degree in interior design, Patti decided to resist. She created the Interior Design Protection Council to challenge ASID's multi-million-dollar lobbying effort. In the eloquent words of Clark Neely, who nominated her and wrote a beautiful nomination speech. I'm going to quote him because I can't beat it. Patti, this is a quotation, Patti assembled networks of independent-minded interior decorators in each state where ASID-backed legislation had been filed or threatened, and transformed those designers into an effective opposition force, taking on ASID in the media, at state capitals, and in the blogosphere, sometimes at great personal cost to Patti, who quickly became a target of vicious personal attacks from ASID members, frustrated by the effectiveness of her advocacy. If not for Patti Morrow's practically single-handed resistance, several states would likely have adopted ASID-backed licensing laws for interior designers. The result would have been that a quintessentially entrepreneurial vocation, one that is open to anybody with a combination of talent, creativity, and drive, would have been completely walled off to but a small handful of people. It is no exaggeration to say, as Clark did say, that of the tens of thousands of people practicing interior design in America today, many are still in business because of someone they never even heard of, Patti Morrow. Patti and I share being slightly gimpy from various circumstances today. But love of freedom is what we share the most. Patti, it is a great honor to present to you the Vernon K. Krieble Foundation Unsung Hero Award and a check for $25,000. It is individual citizens like you who keep freedom strong in America. Congratulations. I know you can't hold this, but this is it. And of course, that's the check. Thank you so much for all that you do.
If you remember only one thing that I say here today, please remember this: every voice counts. I'm not an attorney. I could never have imagined myself talking to legislators or testifying at hearings. I never wanted to be a political activist. I'm just an unknown interior designer who could not just sit by idly and let a group of elitist industry insiders use the government to eliminate their competition for their own personal monetary gain. It's been a David versus Goliath fight from the beginning. When I told my designer friends I was taking on the American Society of Interior Designers, the biggest interior design trade association in the country, and the money and the muscle behind the push for licensing, I was met with horrified gasps. ASID, they said? The ASID? But they're so big. But perhaps like David, I looked at it from a different perspective. If they're that big, how could I possibly miss? So I took my shot, and I didn't miss. I'm usually a pretty easygoing person, but there are two things you don't want to mess with: leave my kids alone and leave my individual freedoms alone. Like many other interior designers, I entered the field as a second career. In 2004, when my children turned 13 and 10, I went back to school to study interior design at the New Hampshire Institute for Art. I loved it, and I was very good at it. In fact, I landed my first client very shortly after starting school. Now, keep in mind that New Hampshire is the live free or die state. So when I met my client at their home, it turned out to be a survival home with 1 foot thick cement walls, each of which they wanted to paint a different jewel tone color. I figured if I could meet that design challenge, I could meet any design challenge. But in late 2006, a licensure bill was introduced into the New Hampshire legislature through the efforts of ASID and a state group that they funded called the New Hampshire Interior Design Coalition. Like most other states, New Hampshire did not require a license to practice interior design, but ASID wanted to change that. If enacted, this bill would have become the most aggressive interior design law in the entire country. I would have had to gone back to another school to get a very specialized 4-year degree. There weren't even any schools like that in the entire state. I would have had to work a 2 to 4 year internship under one of their so-called licensed interior designers. There were only 25 in the entire state, and there was no guarantee that they were even looking to hire an intern. I would have had to take a $2,000 exam that had a 40% passage rate. And I knew that if that law passed, I would have either had to jump through all of those hoops or I would have had to shut down my business. And why? What logical reason could there be for putting me and so many small business entrepreneurs out of business and making it harder for others to enter the field? Well, the supporters of the bill claimed that licensure was necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. But I could not find a shred of evidence that the unregulated practice of interior design presents any genuine public safety risks. It seemed to me that shutting out potential competitors like me was the true objective behind that bill. I was not going to just sit by and let ASID and their puppet New Hampshire coalition dictate who could and who could not practice interior design. But I didn't know where to start. The only political thing I had ever done was vote. So I went to visit the president of my interior design college. I was hoping to get his support to oppose this bill. Not only did I get his support and the support of the college, but he handed me his copy of Designing Cartels by the Institute for Justice. took that book home, and I could not believe what I was reading. It's a very thorough study of ASID's efforts to monopolize the industry, along with an impeccable rebuttal of their rhetoric and their false statements. This report changed my life. I felt like I was no longer a lone voice crying out in the wilderness. So, newly armed with these statistics and new facts, I didn't stop there. I wrote to the Institute for Justice asking for help, even though I knew it was a long shot. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? Well, you can imagine my surprise when a couple of weeks later, I was contacted by Clark Neely in an email informing me that he wanted to help me in what he called defeat this awful proposed interior design legislation. My kids will verify that I screamed yes and started dancing around the room. Well, that was the beginning of my relationship with Clark and the Institute for Justice, and the beginning of the end for the interior design cartel. In early 2007, the New Hampshire bill was scheduled for a hearing. I contacted every interior designer I could find, and in just 7 weeks, we had 3 times as many people in our little grassroots groups than the proponents had, and they had been working on their bill for 7 years. Our little ragtag group attended the hearing, and designer after designer testified against that bill. And then, just for good measure, Clark explained to the committee that this deeply unpopular bill was not only bad policy, but was unconstitutional to boot. That bill went down in flames. I glanced at the supporters as I was leaving the room. They were clearly shocked and horrified that a virtually unknown newbie designer had led the fight to take down their precious bill. I may or may not have smiled at them as I walked past. Immediately after that, I began to get emails from designers in other states. We heard what you did in New Hampshire, they said. Could you please help us fight our licensure bill here? How could I say no when I was so passionate about this topic? I asked Clark for advice, and he strongly encouraged me to stay involved. And it wasn't just words. Clark has been the best mentor I could ever have hoped for. He and others at the Institute for Justice helped me learn how to speak to legislators, how to create clear, concise, one-page handouts, how to harness the powerful tools of grassroots activism and media attention. And just as important, Clark helped me learn how to handle the venomous personal attacks that were about to come. After my first town hall meeting in Florida in 2008, the Florida cartel created a blog for no other reason than just to try to defame and demoralize me. Here is a short excerpt of what they said. If you had seen Patti in person, you begin to realize how pathetic she is. She has such an unprofessional appearance and demeanor. From what anyone can tell, she works out of her home basement and occasionally comes up for air from that dark hole in the ground. This blonde airhead with pink boxing gloves does not represent anything except her health, anyone except herself. She dresses straight out of JCPenney, and where did she get the bleach blonde locks? Well, my first reaction was to bawl my eyes out. The first thing I thought was, what if my kids see this? The second thing I thought was, I do not buy my clothes at JCPenney. But Clark had a very different reaction. This is what he wrote. "This is the funniest thing I've ever read," he said. "Whatever you do, don't let them know they hurt you. This is pure, unadulterated frustration because they can't refute a single word you said, and you've stopped their bogus licensing scheme dead in its tracks." So I took a page from Clark's book, and I replied back to that cartel. "Is that the best you can do?" I said. "My babysitter hits harder than that." And I've never shed a tear since. After that, though, I organized myself under the name Interior Design Protection Council to take the spotlight off me personally so I would not get sidetracked from the important work that I had to do. I'm so thankful for the work of the Institute for Justice, and I can say unequivocally that if not for Clark's leadership and encouragement, I would not still be in the trenches today fighting for interior design freedom. And I think there are a lot of others like me too. People, ordinary citizens who are willing to work to protect their freedoms. They just need someone to come and walk alongside them, someone to show them the ropes, someone like you. As I mentioned before, ASID is behind the 35-year push for licensure. They've spent over $7 million lobbying to create a monopoly to legislate their competitors out of business. Legislation which would allow only the top level of their members to practice. They force their members to pay for lobbying with special assessments, even those members who don't qualify for licensure or maybe don't support it. In Florida, they hired 8 lobbying firms and spent $2 million to fight our deregulation effort. And I'm sure you all know how hard it is to take a law down once it's off the books. And in spite of all that money, we came really, really, really close to getting that law taken down. And remember that pro-regulation New Hampshire coalition, the one whose bill we defeated? Well, the week after the hearing, the president of that coalition said to her members, since New Hampshire isn't the most agreeable state towards licensing, maybe we should try again with just a Title Act and then inconspicuously amend it into a Practice Act. Unfortunately, that kind of under-the-radar deception is the hallmark of the pro-regulation camp. But since defeating that first bill in New Hampshire in 2007, I've helped to derail over 150 bills across the country that would have expanded or enacted new interior design regulations, including at least half a dozen in South Carolina, where I now live. But like zombies, those bills just won't stay dead. So the battle goes on, and I travel from state to state, speaking with legislators, testifying at hearings, and helping interior designers to organize and protect their rights to practice. It's been one wild roller coaster ride, but no other endeavor has ever been so gratifying. I know it's not curing cancer or solving world peace, but saving thousands of jobs, well, that's a good thing. I'd also really like to thank the wonderful people at the State Policy Network, and especially Helen and the Vernon Krieble Foundation for this Unsung Hero Award. You honor me beyond words. I was shocked at just having been nominated. In winning, I can only describe it as surreal and immensely life-impacting. You see, it couldn't have come at a more appropriate time. 4 months ago, while on vacation in South Africa, our vehicle was struck by another vehicle driving at full speed on the passenger side where I was sitting. It took the jaws of life and pneumatic cutting equipment to extract me. I sustained numerous life-threatening injuries to my diaphragm, lungs, stomach, and intestines, 6 fractures to my pelvis, a broken wrist, and a completely severed femur, which is now held together with metal plates and screws. I spent 7 weeks in that South African hospital, and I've been in physical therapy for months, with more in the months ahead before I'm back to 100%. The $25,000 cash prize will help me pay my non-covered medical and other expenses from the accident. Please accept my heartfelt thank you for literally helping me get back on my feet again. As for the future of interior design is a dynamic profession that celebrates innovation, creativity, and diversity. Imposing a one-size-fits-all licensing scheme on the profession could not be more contrary to those values. Best-selling author Stella Cameron said, if all the good guys ran away when things got tough, the bad guys would win. Well, this is one battle the bad guys are not going to win. So back to the trenches I go with the wind at my back and this amazing award lifting my spirits. Thank you so very much.